Hi, everybody. Here's the first Recruiter Enablement interview for 2025. I'm delighted to be joined today by Tom Allegretti. Tom is a recruitment and people operations strategy expert. And Tom, looking forward to talking to you about this. So give us a quick introduction to you, first of all.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to connect with you today. So yeah, for the past, 10 years, I've been doing recruiting operations, people operations, HR strategy. I've been privileged and fortunate to have built out two recruiting operations teams from the ground up as the first hire. So I've done everything and anything you could possibly think of when it comes to recruiting ops. And, prior to that life, I, did some time in financial planning and analysis. And consulting implementing financial modeling software. So kind of a unique background, but have enjoyed the people side and look forward to continuing that wherever that leads me.
So you're probably very handy with Excel. You're probably very handy with Power BI and those types of things.
Um, you know, a little bit. I could be dangerous. I'm not, I don't. I've built some models, but I always find being in the people space that I'm now tasked with building the budget when it comes to annual planning because because I did that in a
Yeah.
prior life. So you
Yeah.
you try and get away from it, but it can never escape you.
Yeah, got it. Okay, so let's talk about enablement. What is it like? Is it part of recruitment operations? Is it like stepsister, or is it like yeah, where does it fit in?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I guess to be really short and concise, yes, it absolutely fits into recruiting operations. Typically when I build out a recruiting operations function, I think of it as, there's a few pillars, right? There's process and programs, tooling and vendors, talent branding, and then, recruiting coordination slash candidate experience, right? And
Yeah.
so enablement really to me falls under that programs pillar, right? Because enablement is all about training. How do you enable everything related to all the people and all the stakeholders involved in hiring and recruiting? How do you enable them to be successful, right? So that's everything from recruiting, onboarding. That could be continuing education and development. That's interviewer training and hiring manager training, right? I mean, all the different people involved in hiring need to know what to do, how to do it, when to do it, and why they're doing it.
Okay, so I'm head of TA at a mid-sized company. We've done basically no enablement type work. Everybody's got tools. They've all got like what I think they need to get their job done, but we haven't actually done any formal enablement. Where do we start? What processes do we go through to really fine-tune everything?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things. One, what I'd say is, you really want to understand what is your actual process, right? Is that actually defined? Is it consistent? Is it standardized throughout the whole? Is everyone doing the same thing, right? Because that's really key. Or where there are variances and nuances, is that detailed and documented, right? Like, for example, certain product might be doing something slightly different than engineering, or G&A might have an assessment, but whatever, like making sure that you have all of those things sort of put together and you have documentation as well, right? Like everything is sort of interconnected and weaved together between like what is the actual process, how is it standardized, what knowledge management do you have so that people can reference that. So when you're thinking about enablement, right, there's the onboarding side of it for new hires on the team, and then there's that continuing education piece of it on the people who are currently the tenured employees, right? It's, are they beginners, intermediate, advanced at what you're trying, at whatever you're doing, right? So when it comes to building out enablement, there's different tactics that I've kind of done on each side, depending on the resources of the team, right? So for onboarding, it's, how can you quickly onboard the team so that they know what to do it quickly so that they can get into their job faster at 100% of their bandwidth,
Yep.
right? And so it's really thinking about, what is the process, what are the systems, what are the different buckets of stuff that you want to put together, and how do you kind of put that into a training program, right? And it's kind of like learning and development, putting together either a live onboarding session, an e-learn, or recorded videos of how to do something. And that would be putting together learning objectives and then like building out the content for each of those learning objectives.
Mm.
So, different sessions for onboarding could be how to open a rec,
Yeah.
how to use the applicant tracking system, how to create an offer and go through approvals, how to schedule, right? How to schedule interviews, how to close out a rec, creating a partnership with the different stakeholders, right? So for example, like some sessions I've had are how recruiters can work with the coordination team and back and forth, right? It's all about what are those main pieces that you need to make sure your team knows to be successful to do their job.
Mhm.
On the more advanced side or the tenured side, right, that continuing education and development, I think for me, a lot of that depends on where the team is at and the different skills. So typically I'll do a voice of recruiting survey once or twice a year. And that is assessing everything from process, programs, systems, development, et cetera. And there is where you use that data to say, okay, like, where is the team? Are they in a beginner, intermediate, advanced, or where are those pockets where you need to up level certain team members? And whether that's through like how to negotiate, how to sell, maybe it might be systems work, right? And people might be at a bit beginner level for using a system like a CRM, and you want to get them up to more of that intermediate or advanced level. And it's really defining where are those continuing education pieces. If it's a tooling piece, a lot of times I'll actually bring on a CSM, um, uh, the AE or the CSM from the vendor and have them do the training sessions versus
Yeah.
me, because they're the ones that are more experts in the tool and can teach them the nuances of how to be more effective and efficient. And it also, I mean, you're paying them for this tool, and it's kind of like a win-win, because they also want you to use the tool more,
Of
because the
course.
more you use it, the less likely you are to stop, to get rid of it. And so that frees up my time to focus on other things while you have an expert who can actually help support you. So I know that was a very long-winded answer, but there's so much within enablement, and that's just on the recruiting team, and we didn't even get into interviewer or hiring manager training as well.
Yeah, no, don't worry. I'm coming to I'm coming to that, I'm afraid. There were several aspects of what you just said that really resonated. The first is like really get into the process and like establish how are we doing things and kind of what should it look like and what are the consistencies, what are the nuances between different teams where some variance is acceptable or is the right thing to do. Work with external vendors who can come and form part of that enablement. And like you're absolutely right. Being on that side myself, I know it's really important for both sides that utilization is high. So hiring managers and interviewers, like the hiring team outside of talent acquisition, my experience is that everybody thinks they're a great interviewer and everybody thinks that they know exactly how to do recruitment. And unfortunately, our world is one that, because it's so visible, everybody's been a candidate or a hiring manager. They all think they know recruitment and that it's easy to do. Tell us about like some of the best ways to go about interacting with non-recruiters to kind of really bring them into the process properly.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that, because I was literally leading a panel a couple of months ago where that same exact thing came up, where we said, everyone thinks they know how to do recruiting and can do our job, but truly, if you want to be successful, like, you need subject matter experts and people who know what they're actually doing, right? I mean, I could go be an engineer with ChatGPT now, but does that mean that I actually know how to be an engineer?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's very true. And so when you think about training, the other stakeholders that are involved in hiring, right, like interviewers or hiring managers, again, it's really important to have data to understand, like, what are you actually, like, where is that population at, right? And where do you want them to go?
Mm-hmm.
um, so for example, I had done at a prior company, I was tasked with building out a hiring manager training program. And they had tried to do it twice before unsuccessfully. They had different things, like they had done live sessions, or they had, done different things, but at the end result was that, like, it was barely attended, no one gave it any thought. And I really tried to understand, like, why is that? And so we actually surveyed hiring managers. What would make you want to come to a training program? And understanding their sentiment around their different roles and responsibilities. Like, do you know how to create a job intake or a recruiting request form, or whatever like that? Do you know how to create a job description? Do you know how to assess candidates? Do you know how to sell? Right. And so what we found was that, through this survey, and it was very insightful, and it kind of made sense, right? Is if you're just going to create a training program that just gives an overview of, like, roles and responsibilities and what to do, like, put that in a document, post it on the internet, and let them read that. People want to attend a training session where they're leaving with a new skill and something that they didn't know about before, that they couldn't have gotten or learned about just by reading something. And we also took, the sentiment around different areas around skills to understand, like, where are hiring managers in that sort of, beginner, intermediate, or advanced level. And so what we found was, again, right, hiring managers don't know how to create sort of like an intake form about, like, what is the job, what are we looking for, pros and cons, strengths, how to build out job descriptions. They didn't know, back when, 10 years ago, when diversity was more front and center and companies were more focused on that, they didn't know what levers to pull to increase diversity in their sort of pipeline, right? They didn't know how to sell or how to properly assess candidates. And so, you know, I basically figured out how to create a training program that focused on skills that they can take away and bring into their search, that resulted in people wanting to actually attend this training program. And
Yeah.
so it's really about making data-driven decision makings to understand where is that population on the sort of, you know, experience curve, and
Yeah.
then understanding what do you need to do to get them from beginner to intermediate and advanced. And it's not about just giving a summary of their, what they need to do, but giving them education on how to do what they need to level up on.
Yeah. Certainly when I've come across hiring managers who have sort of been a little bit passive when it comes to talent acquisition, my approach has been to include really encouraging them to understand that, like, good recruitment is going to be their success. If they hire great people into their team's going to perform much better, and therefore they're going to get their bonuses, they're going to get their promotions, they're going to get whatever their career, objectives are going to be more readily. And I wonder if that's something that's would you consider that to be a good way of doing it? A good
In
message
regards
to promote? Is that a good message to promote to the hiring manager? Like, you're going to succeed better in your career if you really prioritize recruiting.
um I mean, yes, obviously, that makes total sense. And I think, though, that everyone says that. That's like the same talk track, right? And I think at the end of the day, saying that, yeah, it makes sense, obviously. But at the same time, you have to show, like, actual data, right? I think that's where you have to work with the HR business partners,
Yeah.
um, to really understand why is it that the hiring manager might feel that way, and what's actually driving that, and really getting to the root cause to understand that, and actually use real data, not just saying at the high level, here's the insight, because we all know that insight, but getting down to the data to say, hey, you've had 2 bad hires on your team, and that's resulted in you being behind on your goals for the year, or your
Yeah.
team hasn't been as productive because of X, Y, and Z. And from a recruiting data standpoint, when we look at, say, how you assessed a candidate, we noticed that, you didn't focus on X, Y, and Z. And, going forward, here's what we recommend you focus on. And, so it's more about being strategic and using like what's in it for the manager, but
Yeah.
not just at that surface level insight that everyone knows about, but going deeper into like what is the root cause of why the issues are happening on your team.
Mm.
And from there then saying, well, your process is awful and convoluted. You're not really assessing them for the right competencies and attributes to be successful for the role.
Yeah.
Your interviewer feedback all talked about vibe checks without really looking at the skills to be successful, and now your team isn't as productive and not hitting your goals because you're not looking for the right things.
Yeah.
And so it's not just about like hiring the right people will make your team successful. Yeah, everyone knows that. And from the manager's perspective, they probably think they are doing that. But you have to really go down and look at your process and what they're doing and how they're doing it and why they're doing it,
Yeah.
and use that as a way to influence, how to change a perspective of a manager.
Yeah. Very, very important point. Give them data, give them real insights, and they're going to listen a lot more carefully. Tom, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. It's been great to hear from you. I've learned a lot, and look forward to catching up again soon.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for having me.